Approval of the February 19th of 2020 meeting minutes. Are there any additions or changes that need to be made to the the minutes for the February 19th meeting? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved. This is Anthony Holt.
And seconded by Mayor Graham, Spring Hill.
Great, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Okay, thank you all very much. So we'll now move to our second item, which is our public comments. Is there anyone here who would like to address this board? If so, if you will come forward and also state your name for us. Okay, seeing no one, we will move on to our action items today. Our first action item is Resolution TPB 2020-02, guiding the distribution of the HIP funds, which is the Highway Infrastructure Program funds. And Anna is going to take us through this. Anna?
Thank you, Mayor Reed, and good morning, everyone. To serve as a reminder about the purpose of this resolution, I'm just going to give a quick recap about Highway Infrastructure Program funds and our staff's proposal for their utilization. HIP is a funding source that was approved as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act in 2018 when the bill was passed to fund the federal government. And these funds are distributed to states in the same ratio as other formula funds we receive, such as our STBG or FTA 5307 funds. And then they are further suballocated within the state to urbanized and non-urban areas by population. Projects that are eligible to receive these funds have to be located on the federal aid highway system, and they include the construction of highways, bridges, and tunnels, and also projects that involve the elimination of hazards. Now, these funds have a relatively short shelf life, meaning they need to be programmed to a project and obligated for expenditure fairly quickly, in about 2 years from when we receive them, or else they lapse and we lose them. So for that reason, we are proposing to adopt this resolution and make it policy that we hold these funds in a grouping within our TIP, and then make them available on a first come, first served basis to projects that have experienced cost overruns and are in need of funds for right of way or construction in order to complete one of those phases of work. So as a side note, we're proposing the addition of the fiscal year 2019 funds we have received into the TIP in a group of amendments that we're going to be discussing shortly. That's about $4.85 million. We do expect to receive another allocation of these funds for fiscal year 2020 at some point. So if anyone has any questions about this resolution before I turn it back over to Mayor Reed for voting, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay, seeing no questions, I will ask for a motion to approve Resolution TPB 2020-02 for guiding the distribution of the Highway Infrastructure Program funds. Do I have a motion?
Moore moves to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second Anthony Holt.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll now move on to action item number 2, which is adopting a resolution TPB 2020-03, amending the fiscal year 2020 through 2023 TIP. Anna?
Thank you again, Mayor Reed. This is the second cycle of amendments for the current fiscal year 2020. We actually looked at these together back in March. I'll just give a very brief refresher since it's been a while since we discussed them. We have the addition of a project for Eagleville that they were awarded by TDOT, as well as projects in Millersville and Thompson Station. All three of these projects were awarded under TDOT's Active Transportation Program. We have the addition of some funds for ADA service capitalization to one of our transit groupings, as well as some funds that are being added to a project for Murfreesboro Public Transit. We have the addition of a small amount of funds being added to a Safe Routes to School project in Mount Juliet so that they can get that project finished and closed out. And then, as I just mentioned when we were discussing the resolution, the addition of fiscal year 2019 funds to a grouping in the TIP for Highway Infrastructure Program funds. And again, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Okay, seeing no questions for Anna, we do have to hold a public hearing prior to a vote. So is there anyone here to speak for or against this item? Seeing no one, then I will close the public hearing and go to the board for a motion to adopt resolution TPB 2020-03 in the TIP cycle B amendments. Do I have a motion?
Moore moves approval.
Do we have a second?
Graham, second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll now move on to our informational items. We have a couple of today. Our first is the proposed amendments to the fiscal year 2020 through 2023 TIP. And Anna, I think you're going to take this.
Thank you again, Mayor. This is the first time we will be reviewing the third cycle of amendments for this fiscal year. We have 10 amendments total for your review today. I'm just going to walk through these fairly quickly. We have a proposal to add funds to a sidewalk project in Lebanon. This was funding that was awarded to Lebanon by TDOT's 2019 Multimodal Access Grants. We have a proposal to add a project in Mount Juliet for sidewalks on Lebanon Road. This was also awarded to Mount Juliet through TDOT's Multimodal Access Grants. We have a proposal to add funds as well as revise the project description to the Dickerson Pike and CSX Underpass reconstruction project that TDOT is implementing in the Goodlettsville area. A proposal to add funds as well as clarify the scope to the North Nashville Transit Center project being conducted by WEGO. These funds were awarded to the project by TDOT's Multimodal Transportation Resources Division. It's my understanding that this was an Improve Act funding award. We are adding funds and clarifying the scope to the I-65 widening project from State Route 25 to State Route 109 that TDOT is conducting on the northern corridor of I-65. Next, we have the proposal to add 3 projects that are I-24 ramp improvement projects that TDOT is conducting in and around the Nashville area. The proposal is to add these projects to the TIP, all as separate projects. These projects involve safety and operational improvements at these interstate interchanges. Following that, we have a proposal to add a project in Portland, their Richland Park Sidewalk Connector project. This funding was awarded to Portland by TDOT's Transportation Alternatives Program. And then finally, we are adding funds to an existing Greenway project in Spring Hill. This is the Harvey Park Greenway project. This project was also awarded funding through TDOT's Transportation Alternatives Program. And happy to take any questions as well on this group of amendments, should anyone have any.
Okay, since there are no questions for Anna, I just want to remind you all that the draft amendments that she just talked about will be released for public review and comment following this meeting, and that this board is scheduled to adopt these at our June meeting. So if you have any questions in the meantime, you're more than welcome to send Anna an email. So let's move on to item B, which is updates on the transportation planning, the MPO activities. And I just wanted to give you all a brief summary of things that have been taking place over the last couple of months and kind of where we are now, where we're headed, things that I think we as a board need to think about, and most importantly is asking for help. You know, I know that transportation issues have been top priorities for all of us for quite a few years, and I think we would all agree they're still important, but haven't necessarily been top priority for us over the last couple of months. I think we've all been focused on public health and economic concerns for our communities that have been related to the COVID-19. Each one of our local governments have been affected in one way or another, and I think we all now have concerns about what the impact of the pandemic will have on long-term unemployment, our financial sustainability for our local businesses, and our ability as governments to balance upcoming budgets and what projects become priorities for us. And so I would like to thank GNRC for the role they've played in helping keep the Middle Tennessee mayors connected through our coordination calls. For some of you, you might not know, but we have been meeting on a weekly basis, obviously online, and talking about the issues that we're having and trying to help each other out. And I don't know about for the other mayors, but for me, it has definitely been very beneficial, and thanks to you all for making that happen. I think we would all agree that things have been changing hour to hour some days for us. I know that in the town of Smyrna, sometimes we'd get information out to our citizens, and by that afternoon, things had changed. And it's been really nice to know that I could lean on so many other mayors to call to find out what they're doing within their communities and how we are in this together and can help each other out. The virus has also affected the impact of the work that this board does. And when we saw how things were going, I sent a letter on March the 17th to our partners at FHWA, FTA, TDOT, and to each one of you to let you know our concerns about the impact not only of the coronavirus, but also of the March 2nd tornado, and how we thought it might impact our schedule for adopting the update to our regional plan. I wanted to make sure that everyone understood that putting this plan together is so important for our board, and it's important for all of those individuals that live in our Middle Tennessee region. We want to make sure with this plan, we're not just checking boxes to say that we've completed the plan. We want to make sure that this is a plan that is usable and that it's going to be able to be used in the years to come. And we know some of our partners that we work with across the area have limited bandwidth to be able to engage in detailed analytics and long-range policy making while the Safer at Home order was in place. And I think we would all agree that the transportation issues we have here in our region are too important for us to move forward without the community engagement piece. Over the last couple of months, I think our citizens have been focusing on their individual health, their family's health, and the economy, and rightfully so. In October of last year, you all remember we gathered in Nashville to roll out our Solve This Together campaign. Our goals from then to now haven't changed. We have a serious commitment on this board to partnership and collaboration to make this a good plan that's usable over the coming years. The only difference is the series of events that have been out of our control in our region with the tornadoes and the COVID-19. In the letter that I sent to Pam, I asked for her help in regards to flexibility as we approach the federal deadlines. I asked that we have a meeting with the planning partners of GNRC, Public Transit, TDOT, and the federal agencies to discuss a timeline for adopting the plan once the COVID-19 crisis somewhat stabilized. And now that the safer at home statewide order has been lifted and things are starting to get back open and a little bit back to normal, I think it is important for these groups to get together to come up with our game plan. So with all of this said, let me provide you an update of kind of where we are right now. So GNRC staff has continued to meet with TDOT, FHWA, and our local planning and public works and transit agency staff that serve on the TCC, or the Transportation Coordinating Committee, to continue to carry out our technical work on the plan. This includes the ongoing implementation of our CMP, or the congestion management process, the coordination of our roadway safety data, and the assessment of the emerging technologies and smart mobility applications. The GNRC planning consultants have continued their work on the major studies, but have been on hold with the community engagement pieces since the March 2nd tornadoes. Both the South Corridor study and the Downtown Interstate Loop study will resume public involvement in the coming weeks, but obviously that's going to look a little differently than what we're used to in regards to public engagement. GNRC continues to work with our area partners to finalize the forecasting tools that are going to help to assess the impact of our growth and development on transportation performance in the future, and we're going to hear about 2 of those today in our meeting. And finally, we've had multiple conversations with TDOT leadership on the status of our planning products and the challenges that have been associated with the COVID-19. Now, let's talk a little bit about where we're headed. We're reaching out to Metro Nashville and TDOT to learn more about how the COVID-19 has impacted their planning efforts. As many of you know, Mayor Cooper and his office were in the process of developing a plan for Davidson County that was to be integrated into the regional plan, and TDOT was in the process of conducting a regional congestion study to identify new projects beyond those that were already incorporated into the Improve Act. Obviously, both of these items are a major part of us having a successful, usable regional plan. We are going to be reaching out to our federal partners to discuss the challenges we're encountering and that we will continue to encounter in completing the regional plan, given the circumstances we all face. I would really like to complete this meeting as soon as possible so that we can bring back to you all as a board at our scheduled June 17th meeting. So staff, if you can please work with TDOT and our federal agencies and public transit to try and coordinate a date for us to get together to have these discussions, I would really appreciate it. And so hopefully we will have information to bring back to this board at our June 17th meeting. Now, I said there's several things I think we all need to consider And just so you know, we have already absorbed a 2-month delay in our schedule earlier this year. We already talked about that as we extended the board's deadline for submitting projects to the GNRC staff. And then for a timeline, so you know, the very next workday, we're hit by the tornadoes. The technical work has continued, but obviously it's a little bit slower pace. I think we all understand that from having to work from home, and consultants have worked remotely, but it's just not the same as when you're at your desk and have those tools and resources available. As mayors, I think we need to assess how the COVID-19 will impact our local funding priorities, and specifically how we might need to reassess the information that we submitted to the GNRC in December. If your communities are like the town of Smyrna, those are things that we are currently looking at and working through. As a region, I think we need to assess how the state of Tennessee will react to the budget shortfalls. We definitely need to have a conversation with TDOT about how declining revenues are going to impact their work programs and the investments plan for our region. As a planning organization, I think we need to assess how we can engage the public and stakeholders in a meaningful conversation about transportation in this post-COVID-19 world. I mean, not only will there be concerns about how best to engage the public, but, you know, at this time, have the concerns of our people and businesses shifted based on the experiences we've had over the past couple of months. I want you all to remember that we are scheduled to adopt the major update to the plan in 2021, but we already have a plan in place that's a sound plan that has identified projects through 2040, and a newly adopted transportation improvement program that has allocated more than $1 billion through the year 2023. So with all that said, I just want to reiterate what I said in the beginning, that this plan is so important for this board, and I know each one of you feels that way. It's also important for our partners, and it's also important for the citizens of our region. I want to make sure this plan is just not a check things off the box so that we can turn it in and have it done. I want to make sure that it's something that we can use for years to come. I hope I've explained what's been taking place over the last couple of months, kind of where we are now and where we're headed, and things that I think we need to seriously consider. The last thing that I told you when I started was that I was going to ask for help. And Pam, I'm really hoping that you and your staff will be able to carry the flag for us in asking for assistance and flexibility with our federal partners. I know that MPOs and regional councils across the country are expressing concerns to Washington, D.C. I also know how invested you personally are and your staff have been in helping us get this plan together. And I can't imagine that there isn't a better person to take on this task than you. And there's no other person in the federal system who understands our needs better than what you do. So any help and assistance that you can give us, I can't tell you how much we would appreciate. I know I have given you guys a ton of information. I am happy to take any questions or comments, but I kind of just wanted to paint the picture of where we've been, where we're going, and things we need to consider.
More here. I'm ready to start drinking some of that Kool-Aid Mary Esther is drinking right now. I just want to compliment Mayor Reed on her leadership here with the Transportation Policy Board. This is not an easy job. It's a very complicated task, and I think she's laid out so many great points here. You know, the pandemic definitely has affected our thought process at this point. We've been focused elsewhere in our communities, trying to make sure our communities were safe. When we go out and drive around right now, there doesn't seem to be much of a traffic problem, but we should not be lured into thinking that we solved it. It's not solved. It's coming back. We're opening up, and we're going to continue to experience challenges with transportation. I think Mary Esther has made a really good point that it's really, really important that we all get on the same page and work together to solve this problem. Not a single one of us as an organization or as individuals in any of the organizations can solve the problem. And so it's going to take a big team effort. And I'm willing to be part of that team, just as I know everybody on this call is eager to be part of it and try to figure out. We can't stop planning. We can't stick our heads in the sand right now. Now is, fortunately, we have just a little bit of a breather, and we can be maybe a bit more deliberate about our planning. So thanks for how hard staff is working. Thanks for how hard Mary Esther and the rest of the policy board is working together. And also kudos to Pam and her team, and to TDOT and their team. And it's a good opportunity right now to welcome Preston Elliott. I've had an opportunity to work with Preston quite a bit through the years since he was on our local transit authority, and excited for his position there at TDOT. So thank you, Mayor Reed.
Thanks, Mayor Moore. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing no one else, then we will move on to item C, which is our Unified Transportation Plan of Growth Forecasting. And Max, I think you're going to take this.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. Good morning, everybody. You can move to the next slide, please, Sean. Thank you. So what you see here is a handout, small area projections. This is what your local staff, and I do give them a giant pat on the back, have been helping us to better refine the land use forecasting model. So this is the first run of forecast that they have used. Next page, please. In combination with, as Mayor Reed discussed, we had to be a little bit creative since we're not sitting in our office or able to meet in person. We've created an online application and have been working with your staff on doing a couple of things: vetting the base year understanding, as well as identifying pipeline development or expected development to be completed between our base year of 2017 and today, as well as stuff that is in the works but not yet on the ground, but is expected in the first horizon year of 2025. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, your staff has been really great helping us identify all of these, as well as helping us out with future land use plan identification and zoning regulations, and making sure that we're interpreting those correctly. Next page. And kind of a summary of all of those that we have been in consultation or have submitted us with their pipeline development thus far. And leading in, I'll introduce Vince. The land use model output, as well as it is useful for several different things, its main intent is for use in the travel demand model. So it is actually the output of the future year forecast population and employment is then fed into the travel demand model and creates the expected demand that you would see on the roadway network and transit network. And Vince has been helping us out in creation of the travel demand model for about the past year. And I'll turn it over to him to kind of talk about some of the details of a travel demand model and what we can expect to get out of it.
Thank you, Max. You want to advance the slide? Great. So I'm a director at RSG. We're a bit of a boutique consulting firm, originally founded by Dartmouth faculty. Our focus is on the transportation industry, data and analytics. Next slide. We serve a broad swath of clients, both private and public sector in transportation, kind of across the spectrum from MPOs and local transit agencies and so forth to federal highway and federal transit administrations, as well as folks like Boeing and Uber and Amazon and so forth. Next slide. We have developed roughly half of the activity-based models in the United States. Most of the large MPOs in the United States now maintain, actually most now maintain both a trip-based and an activity-based model. And so Nashville has joined, I guess, that group. Next slide. The new model will, of course, be capable of doing all the sorts of things that the previous model did, helping support understanding of kind of big picture transportation trends, doing deficiency analyses to identify potential new needs for projects, comparing projects and their benefits on a consistent consistent framework on a level playing field, supporting more detailed studies for major projects, and as a starting point, also for more detailed kind of like things like traffic simulations for signal timings and so forth. The new version of the model will also be able to do some things, some valuable things that the previous model was not able to do. In particular, the new model is able to better account for the impact of built environment, density and design and so forth on the way that people travel. So in areas where there is that are dense and are walkable, people walk more. And so it also, in general, better support for walk and bike analyses. The new model is also more disaggregate. It represents individual travelers rather than sort of grouping them together in large groups. And that allows us to do, or you to do, equity analyses that break out the impacts and the benefits of transportation improvements to various market segments, and there's great flexibility in how you define those. It allows you to, the new model also has a more continuous representation of time. Although there's still some limitations there, it does a much better job of representing, for instance, the way that peak period congestion spreads over time as people choose to leave earlier or later to avoid peak congestion. It also has greater and better ability to evaluate various travel demand management strategies. It has a great ability to evaluate both the direct and the indirect impacts of working from home, for instance, which is clearly relevant at the moment, as well as other sorts of things like targeted reduced transit fares and so forth. Next slide. This is just an overview of the framework of the model. As I was saying, it represents individual people, and it uses econometric models to try to understand and predict the choices that people make about where they go, when, and how they get there. Next slide. The model is very data hungry, and so that's hence part of the connection with the land use model is trying to feed it. There are lots of things that go into it, socioeconomic and land use data, both for the present and for forecast for the future year. There is, of course, also all the information on the roadway network and transit routes. Next slide. The new model is much more spatially detailed than its predecessor, and that's why and how it can support analysis of things like walk and bike. It uses over 30,000 microzones for the region. They are based on and closely related to census blocks, and they make use, of course, of the land use model outputs. The new model also uses an all streets network for looking at things like walking and biking, and incorporates variables on what is nearby, what's in walking distance, for instance. So even though you have lots of employment that might in some ways look similar, maybe in downtown or say near the mall in Mount Juliet, the model can kind of understand that there's some difference in the walkability of those places. Next slide. Lots of data went into the development and the validation of the model as well. One of the big differences this time around is that this time we have big data from people's cell phones, from their apps, to help us understand travel patterns that wasn't available previously. In particular, that provides us data not only on the travel of residents of the region, but also on the travel of visitors to the region, which of course is an important thing in your region. And so that was an important update to the model, and I think the new model does a much better job of representing visitor travel in the region. Next slide. This is a quick snapshot, some overview of the validation results. Of course, this is looking at the comparison of the model traffic, the roadway flows on the network versus the traffic counts. These are preliminary results, but we're very pleased. We actually, the results are slightly better than the visual, what's in the slide at this point. But out of the box, we're very pleased that the model was meeting almost all the TDOT criteria or 10 MUG criteria before we made any specific adjustments, calibration adjustments to achieve that. Next slide. Of course, we're doing the same thing also compare on the transit side. This is looking at route level boardings versus what the model is showing. Next slide. And, again, part of the real value of your new activity-based model is the outputs. Of course, it outputs the same sorts of things as the previous model in terms of roadway volumes, speeds and travel times, and transit line riderships. But the new model gives you much more detailed, granular outputs on the characteristics of the travel demand. The example kind of on the right shows some of the various interesting different kinds of market segments you can look at and break things out by. Next slide. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Max.
Thanks, Vince. As far as timing goes, I think by the end of the week, we are hopeful to have a finalized base year for both the land use assumptions and have that output from the travel demand model. The following week, we expect to have the forecasted land use as well as beginning to integrate it into the travel demand model and hope to present at the June 3rd TCC meeting our land use and travel demand model outputs for the current and all of our future horizon years. And with that, I believe I'm turning it back over to Mayor Reed.
Great, thanks, Max and Vince. Any questions or comments for Max or Vince? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our regular reports, and we have a TDOT report. And I'd also like to say, Preston, we are glad to have you. tell you that I've kind of been doing some checking around since I really didn't know you, and I've heard nothing but great things. So the bar has been set really high for you, and we know you're going to come in and do a great job. But I'll turn it over to TDOT at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, and thank you, Mayor Moore. I guess it may be appropriate to say it's good to be home again. Some of you probably don't know this, but maybe you do. At one point in time, I was with the Nashville MPO. I was the MPO coordinator. I like to jokingly reference to that as when I had hair, but I would be lying to you. I don't think I had hair. Somebody showed me a photo when I was back at TDOT back in 2003, and I pretty much looked the same, just a little grayer. I know you have another meeting backed up behind this, so I won't try to keep you too long on our report out. I appreciate everyone's time. The department, while COVID-19 obviously has been very impactful to operations and so forth, we've attempted to kind of keep moving as best we can. Within the department, we've got a couple of strategies on working from home and return to work. Those are some strategies that we're employing in order to keep business moving. So since, I guess, probably our last meeting with you all, we are working on a I-4081 corridor study. This actually is a statewide corridor study that was done probably maybe 10 plus years ago, actually a little longer than that. So we had one of our public meetings. We utilized Zoom, and we had that back, I think it was last month. And our participation, we had a little bit over 35 people participate via the webinar here in, I guess it was in our Region 3, so it included more than just Nashville. Again, that was about 3 weeks ago. So it was our first round of public engagement. We're working to have that plan complete by early 2021. Another effort that we're working on, I think that would be very important to each of you and your communities, and is an statewide active transportation plan. This essentially is an update to the statewide bicycle and pedestrian plan the department has had. This effort is actually taking a little bit more of an internal review and including our interaction with key stakeholders, including the MPOs, local municipalities, nonprofit organizations, as well as cities and across the state. And so I believe yesterday our staff met with yours to go over what work with the MPO staff to talk about some more of the very detailed components of planning for and providing sidewalk and bikeway improvements and providing non-motorized modes. And we have a online survey, and I will see if one of our staff can share the link in the chat. If not, we'll get it to Sean so that we can have you all participate if you haven't already. Really exciting effort. It's going to kind of create a long-term vision and some short-term decision opportunities. Again, it's not necessarily a project-based plan. It's really looking at key opportunities in terms of improving process and then focusing strategies and policies to kind of best move the needle on improving walking and biking within our communities across the state. Lastly, I would like to reference, that effort is to be complete sometime in fall, maybe around November, December of this year. I think that's a targeted date for completion of that effort. Two last things I'd like to hit, well, actually three, sorry about that. Money side, funding side, I think you all like this. So I think, you know, we have a couple of grant programs that we have been successful to get out to you all. One of those is the Multimodal Access Grant Program, and statewide we were able to award 18 grants for about $15 million in total. There are two in the Nashville MPO area, one for the City of Lebanon and the City of Mount Juliet. They're both pedestrian improvements. We also have funding through the Improve Act for transit. And again, we, over the last, I think it was about 2-3 weeks ago, awarded $20 million in Improve Act funds for transit, about 14 projects in total, 2 projects here in the Nashville MPO area going to WeGo. And then lastly, there is a bill grant application that was for federal funds or competitive funds. Most of you are familiar with this. And statewide, there were about 10 submitted. The department was involved in 3, so the other remaining 7 were locally initiated ones. And I think in the Nashville area, there are 3 that were submitted, one by the state, which is for an interchange improvement at Donaldson Pike and I-40. And then I think the other project is in Metro Nashville, which was for the North Nashville Transit Center. And then I think there was one up in Hendersonville. I think that's it. So sorry for being a little long on this, but thank you for the opportunity to let us give you an update on our activities.
Great. Any questions for Preston? Okay, glad to have you with us. Thanks so much. I'm going to move on to the staff report. And Sean, I think you just have a couple of items for us.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. The one thing I just want to give a preview on is that we have an upcoming Unified Planning Work Program amendment that we're preparing. And some of the components that go into this is programming some of the prior planning funds, carryover planning funds into this current Unified Planning Work Program that stretches 2 fiscal years, 2020, as well as next year, federal fiscal year 2021. In addition to that, we'd be identifying some additional planning activities to perform in the next fiscal year, documenting some of the related planning activities that are underway or scheduled within the region. This could be by TDOT, transit providers, or local governments. I think one concrete example, as Preston just spoke about, was the statewide active transportation plan. And so that's one item that we can work with them to gather the details on to make sure that it's captured in the work program. And then considering any new requests from members as we look to develop the next Unified Planning Work Program, which would also stretch 2 years and begin in federal fiscal years 2022. So we'll be preparing that amendment to present to you at next month's meeting. And so let us know. We've been working with your staff as well to collect any of this information, but look forward to that next month. And then we have I'll send around some other reminders, but I know that we're short on time, and so we can just incorporate those into a follow-up email.
Okay, anything else, Sean?
No, that's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, any questions for Sean? Under Chair's report, I mean, I kind of gave you all an overview of what's been taking place. I do want to take this opportunity to tell each one of you I am in awe of the things that you are doing within your communities, to see how each one of you have stepped up and taken on the challenge of the things that we're facing day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. You all have accepted that challenge and excelled. Your citizens within your communities are lucky to have each one of you, and I feel very lucky to know each one of you and to be able to call on you when I have a question or a concern about an issue we're having in the town of Smyrna to get help. So thank you for all that you're doing to make your communities better, but all that we're doing to make our region better. And before we adjourn, I'm going to let Michael provide some instructions for those of us who are going to be joining the GNRC meeting. Michael, can you kind of tell us what we need to be doing once we exit off of this meeting?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to commend you and staff and all the partners involved in today's webinar. I think we've all been part of these things that don't go as smoothly and I've probably jinxed our next meeting. But speaking of that, I do want to encourage all the city and county mayors who serve on the regional council, which is essentially all of you, to stick around and join our next meeting of the executive board. We do have some action items that relate to some small business lending activities that we do. We need to make some accommodations for the state of emergency. And so please do stick around. We do need a quorum. But in addition to that, we have a presentation from Michelle Lacewell on our staff and Ralph Schultz and Matt Bailey from the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce for the annual Vital Signs Report, which is an important product to understanding issues and trends across Middle Tennessee that are integrated into the planning efforts, including transportation that we do on a regular basis. We also have a presentation on the results of our fiscal year 2019 independent audit. There were no findings. It was a clean audit. And then finally, staff will update you with a few emerging opportunities for funding in the wake of some congressional action in response to COVID-19. So to get to that meeting, the link to join is on our website and directly provided to you in the calendar invite or the email that was sent out. As you transition from this meeting to that meeting, because it is a separate link, we do ask that you take the time to go to gnrc.org/roll call. It's just roll call this time around, not TPB roll call, but just gnrc.org/roll call so we can get an accurate count for the purposes of a quorum. So again, the link is in your emails. If you have any issues, please reach out to us, but we'll look to convene that meeting here in about 5 minutes. Thanks again, everyone. It was, I enjoyed the meeting.
Michael, thanks for the update and for how to transition. Our next board meeting will be on June the 17th. I'll be honest, I hope I get to see each one of you in person. I am looking forward to getting back to some normalcy. And but if not, we will join again online. So if there is nothing else to come before this board, then we are adjourned.